In the multi-billion-dollar world of exotic supercars, conventional business logic states that to build a global empire, you need massive assembly plants, thousands of robotic arms, endless private equity funding, and generational aristocratic pedigree. Every elite boardroom in Italy believed that speed was a function of scale, but they were dead wrong. A penniless immigrant who once swept the filthy concrete floors of Lamborghini built a company that completely humiliated corporate automotive orthodoxy, demanding $5 million per vehicle, earning higher profit margins than Ferrari, and rewriting the rules of modern luxury. The secret was not luck, capital, or heritage. It was a calculated, dangerous, contrarian revolution against corporate arrogance. To understand why this revolution worked, you must look at the fatal blind spot that infects almost every dominant corporation. When an industry leader gets comfortable, they stop looking at fundamental truths and start copying their own past. In the late 1980s, the automotive capital of the world was Modena, Italy. Ferrari ruled the track, and Lamborghini ruled the posters on every teenager's bedroom wall. Both companies believed that sports cars would always be built out of heavy, stamped steel and hand-shaped aluminum panels. Inside the Lamborghini factory in Sant'Agata Bolognese, one man saw the future with terrifying clarity. His name was Horacio Pagani. He was not an Italian aristocrat. He was not a high-ranking executive. He was an outsider from the dusty plains of Casalda, Argentina, who had clawed his way into the company through sheer persistence. Horacio had spent months heading an experimental skunkworks project inside Lamborghini, the Countach Evoluzione. It was an astonishing vehicle. Instead of heavy steel, Horacio built the entire chassis and body out of a strange, woven aerospace material known as carbon fiber. When they pushed the prototype onto the test track, the results were mind-bending. The car was 500 kilograms lighter than the standard Countach. It was drastically stiffer, structurally indestructible, and accelerated with violent, effortless speed. Horacio knew he was holding the Holy Grail. He realized that the entire high-performance automotive universe was on the verge of a historic materials revolution. There was only one problem. To manufacture carbon fiber parts at production quality, you needed a massive, specialized pressurized industrial oven known as an autoclave. Horacio requested an urgent meeting with the highest corporate executives at Lamborghini. He walked into the boardroom, placed the lightweight woven composite samples on the polished mahogany table, and presented his case. He pleaded with them to purchase an industrial autoclave immediately so Lamborghini could control the future of carbon fiber manufacturing in-house. The managing director looked down at the samples, looked back up at Horacio, and scoffed. He asked Horacio a simple question. Is Ferrari using an autoclave to build their production road cars? Horacio replied, no, not yet. The executive pushed the samples away and delivered the line that would haunt Lamborghini for the next 40 years. If Ferrari does not need one, then Lamborghini certainly does not need one. Carbon fiber is too expensive. It will never work for production, and we will not waste company money on a giant oven. That moment is what behavioral economists call corporate consensus bias. The deadly belief that if your biggest rival isn't doing something, then the idea must have no value. Most corporate employees in that room would have nodded, taken their safe paycheck, and forgotten the idea. But Horacio Pagani was not an ordinary employee. He was someone who had already risked his entire existence just to be inside that building. To understand why Horacio refused to bow to corporate authority, you have to look at where he came from. He was the son of a baker in Argentina. He had grown up watching his father wake up at 3 in the morning to knead dough, learning that raw materials only transform into value through relentless, disciplined manual labor. As a young boy, Horacio had discovered the notebooks of Leonardo da Vinci. Da Vinci taught him that art and science were not two separate worlds. They were two halves of the exact same soul. When you build a machine, it must obey the brutal laws of physics, but it must also touch the emotional spirit of the human being who looks at it. In his early 20s, Horacio had built his own fiberglass racing cars in Argentina with his bare hands. But when economic collapse and hyperinflation destroyed the Argentine manufacturing sector, he made an all-or-nothing gamble. He sold his small shop. He sold his belongings. He packed 2 bicycles, a small camping tent, and moved across the Atlantic to Italy with his young wife, carrying nothing in his pocket except a single letter of introduction from his idol, the 5-time Formula One champion Juan Manuel Fangio. When he arrived in Modena, Ferrari slammed their doors shut. Lamborghini told him there was no engineering work. The only job available was at the absolute bottom of the factory hierarchy, sweeping floors, degreasing oily machinery, and carrying heavy sheet metal in the body shop. Horacio did not hesitate for a second. He picked up the broom. Why? Because an amateur waits for status. But an entrepreneur seeks proximity. He knew that if he was physically inside the factory walls, nobody could stop him from observing the manufacturing process. He worked his regular shift with total humility. But when 5 o'clock arrived and the other workers clocked out, Horacio stayed behind in the silence of the shop floor. He studied the structural welds. He analyzed the stress fractures on broken aluminum panels. He practiced shaping sheet metal until his hands bled. His speed, obsessive discipline, and profound understanding of materials forced the management to promote him again and again, until he was running their advanced composite research. And now, here he was, standing in the executive boardroom, being told by suit-wearing corporate managers that the future he had proven on the racetrack was an illusion. That boardroom rejection triggered a moment of radical entrepreneurial rebellion. Horacio realized that if you wait for giant corporations to see the future, you will die waiting in the past. If Lamborghini refused to buy the machine that would define the next century of supercar engineering, he would buy it himself. He walked out of the factory and straight into an Italian bank. Think about the sheer financial insanity of this move. Horacio was an immigrant with 0 inherited wealth, no wealthy family backing, and a modest salary. He looked the loan officer in the eye, put his personal name and entire financial future on the line, and took out an enormous, crushing loan to purchase a commercial-grade aerospace autoclave. He had no private factory. He had to rent a small, freezing cinder block shed in the Italian countryside just to house the giant metal cylinder. In 1991, Horacio made the final break. He resigned from Lamborghini, gave up his corporate safety net, and founded his own independent design and manufacturing firm, Modena Design. The pressure on his shoulders was suffocating. Every single month, the bank demanded massive loan repayments for the autoclave. If he failed to generate immediate cash flow, the bank would repossess the machine, seize his assets, and leave him bankrupt on the street. This is where most visionary engineers collapse. They try to build their dream product too early, run out of working capital, and go out of business within 12 months. Horacio was smarter than that. He executed a brilliant, low-profile business strategy that completely de-risked his venture. Instead of rushing to build his own supercar, he used his autoclave to operate as a high-precision composite supplier. He manufactured ultra-rigid carbon fiber components for Formula One racing teams, aerospace contractors, and even the established supercar manufacturers who had mocked him years earlier. He let the entire industry pay off the debt on his machine. Modena Design became a profitable cash flow engine. But while the daytime was dedicated to paying client invoices, the midnight shift belonged to Horacio's true obsession. A secret project codenamed the C8, he was quietly designing his own hypercar from the ground up. Horacio understood something profound about market positioning. You cannot beat an established giant by playing their game. Ferrari and Lamborghini were ramping up volume, trying to produce hundreds, then thousands of cars per year to satisfy corporate shareholders. Horacio realized that mass production forces you to make terrible compromises. You have to use cheaper plastics on the dashboard. You have to cut corners on the suspension mounts. You have to outsource wiring to low-cost suppliers. You have to design for the average wealthy buyer. Horacio chose the complete opposite path: radical artisanal scarcity. He did not want to build a mass-market sports car. He wanted to build something the modern world had never seen, a hypercar crafted with the mechanical precision of an aerospace rocket and the artistic detail of a 16th-century Renaissance masterpiece. Every single switch on the dashboard would be milled from a solid billet of aerospace aluminum. The body panels would be woven from carbon fiber so perfectly that the weave pattern aligned down the center of the car like the spine of a predatory animal. Every single suspension bolt would be custom machined out of titanium, stamped with the Pagani crest, costing thousands of dollars for a single set of fasteners. He was not selling transportation. He was not even selling speed. He was selling irreplaceable, timeless mechanical art. Then, just as the first full-scale prototype chassis was completed, Horacio collided with a structural business barrier that had destroyed dozens of ambitious boutique automakers before him. He had no engine. Developing a bespoke, road-legal V12 engine from a clean sheet of paper costs hundreds of millions of dollars in thermodynamic research, emissions testing, and foundry tooling. For an independent shop in Modena, building a proprietary V12 was an economic impossibility. If he used a cheap, modified mass-market engine, the brand would be dismissed as an amateur kit car. He needed the most prestigious, mechanically flawless power plant on Earth. He targeted Mercedes-Benz and their elite AMG performance division. To the corporate board at Mercedes-Benz in Stuttgart, Horacio Pagani was a complete nobody. Giant German industrial conglomerates do not hand over their flagship, racing-derived V12 engines to unproven independent workshops operating out of small Italian towns. Once again, Horacio played his most valuable asset, the bond of respect he had forged years ago with Juan Manuel Fangio. Fangio had watched Horacio's journey from a humble Argentine workshop to the heart of Modena. He sent a personal message to the leadership of Mercedes-Benz, stating plainly, "If Horacio Pagani is building a car, you must give him our engines. He is a genius of the highest order." Mercedes-Benz sent engineering inspectors to Horacio's workshop to examine the prototype. When the German engineers inspected the carbon fiber chassis, they were stunned. The torsional rigidity, the finish of the composite weave, and the fanatical attention to detail surpassed anything coming out of the massive corporate factories in Germany or Italy. The deal was signed. Mercedes-AMG agreed to hand-build exclusive, naturally aspirated V12 engines, specifically for Pagani. The final piece of the puzzle had locked into place. In March 1999, Horacio arrived at the Geneva Motor Show with the finished vehicle, the Pagani Zonda C12. The corporate titans of Motor Valley gathered around the stand, expecting to witness an embarrassing failure. Instead, the entire show ground to a halt. The automotive world had never witnessed anything like it. The quad-exhaust pipe arrangement modeled after a jet fighter, the hand-stitched leather interior, the raw exposed carbon fiber, and the thunderous roar of the AMG V12 shattered every expectation. The car was an immediate global sensation. Orders flooded into the small workshop. Billionaires, royal families, and elite car collectors began waving open checkbooks. Right here is where 99% of business owners make their fatal mistake. When unexpected demand explodes, typical founders borrow heavily, build giant factories, scale up production to hundreds of units a year, and dilute their brand. Horacio did the exact opposite. He refused to scale. He strictly capped production to a microscopic number of cars per year, sometimes fewer than 20 vehicles. By keeping production permanently below global demand, Horacio created an extraordinary economic feedback loop. Pagani cars did not depreciate like typical luxury cars. The moment a Zonda left the factory floor, its value skyrocketed on the secondary market. Collectors realized that buying a Pagani was not an extravagant liability. It was one of the most profitable alternative financial investments in the world. This gave Horacio unmatched pricing power. When he launched subsequent models like the Huayra and the Utopia, he was able to command $2 million, $3 million, and upwards of $10 million for special editions. Even more incredible, his wealthy clients were eager to pay for their vehicles entirely upfront, years in advance. Horacio Pagani had unlocked the holy grail of corporate finance. He was funding the multi-million-dollar research, development, and engineering of future hypercars entirely through customer deposits, without taking a single dime of predatory bank debt, and without selling a single share of company equity to private equity sharks. He continued to push the boundaries of materials science, patenting carbotitanium, a radical composite that weaves titanium strands directly into carbon fiber, preventing the chassis from shattering under extreme impact. Today, Ferrari is traded on the stock exchange, beholden to quarterly earnings calls and volume targets. Lamborghini is owned by the massive corporate umbrella of Volkswagen. Pagani Automobili remains completely independent, family-owned, and debt-free. Every single car that leaves the sanctuary in San Cesareo sul Panaro is still personally inspected by Horacio himself. Think about the magnitude of this transformation.